At 5:52 in the morning, my phone rang, and before I even answered it, my hands started shaking. Not enough for anyone to notice, just a quiet trembling in my fingers that slowly moved into my chest. The kind your body understands before your mind is ready to accept it. I stared at the screen for a moment, then answered, and the voice on the other end was calm, careful, practiced in a way that told me she had said these words many times before. "Mrs. Hale, I'm calling from St. Matthew's Hospital. Your mother passed during the night. Peacefully." Passed peacefully. I used to believe those words meant something soft, something kind, but that morning they felt empty, like something important had been taken and quietly covered. And I didn't cry. I just sat there on the edge of my bed, feet against the cold floor, phone still in my hand, listening to the silence of a house that suddenly felt unfamiliar, as if something had already changed before I fully understood it. By the time I reached her house, the morning had already begun, but the light felt distant, like it didn't belong to me, and the door opened the same way it always had, that soft creak she never fixed, and inside everything was exactly as she left it, the same worn sofa, the same folded blanket, the same faint smell of strong coffee that had settled into the walls over the years, and something else. Now, something colder, something final. Absence has a smell. No one tells you that. And I moved slowly through the rooms, touching things without thinking, the edge of the table, the back of a chair, as if my hands were trying to confirm she had really been here, that her life had been more than quiet routines and small habits that no one paid attention to. Everyone always said the same thing about my mother, that she lived a simple life. But what they really meant was that she lived with nothing, no savings, no comfort, no ease, just enough to get through each day, and I believed I understood her. And standing in that house, I realized how easily we accept the surface of a person when it asks nothing from us. I called my daughter. First, she picked up distracted, her voice already somewhere else. "Oh, okay, Mom, I'm really busy today. We'll figure out the funeral later." As if it could wait. As if my mother had been something that could be arranged around convenience. And I said nothing because there was nothing to say that wouldn't sound like I was asking for more than she was willing to give. My son didn't answer at all. I left a message I knew would sit unheard for hours, maybe days, because that's how things had become. Short calls, delayed replies, conversations that felt more like obligation than connection. And sitting there in that quiet house, I felt something settle into me, something heavier than grief, the realization that my mother hadn't just died alone. She had lived that way too, and none of us had really stopped long enough to see it. That evening, I found myself at her kitchen table, sitting in the same chair she used for years, the one where she used to correct the way I sat, telling me posture mattered, that discipline was a form of respect. I used to ignore her now. I sat straight without thinking. Some lessons stay in your bones long after the voice that taught them is gone, and the house wasn't peaceful. It was still in a way that felt unfinished, like something had been left behind on purpose and without fully deciding to. I began opening drawers slowly, carefully, as if I was afraid of missing something that didn't want to be found too quickly. There was nothing at first. Old papers, worn utensils, neatly folded cloths. The quiet evidence of a life lived without excess, without display. Nothing that suggested my mother had been anything more than what we all believed she was. Until I reached the last drawer, the one at the back, and I moved things aside. And then I saw it. An envelope, yellowed, untouched, placed too deliberately to be forgotten, and something in me tightened. I picked it up slowly, and for a moment I just looked at it. Then I turned it over, and that was when my breath caught. My name, written in her hand. Clear, certain, waiting. In that moment, something shifted inside me. Not grief, not yet. Something deeper, something that made the room feel smaller, because suddenly my mother didn't feel like someone I had lost. She felt like someone I had never truly known. And I stood there holding that envelope longer than I should have, feeling its weight, knowing it was too light to carry everything. It suddenly seemed to hold. I should have opened it right then. Anyone would have. But I didn't. Because deep down, before I had any proof, before I had any understanding, I felt something I couldn't explain. A quiet certainty that whatever was inside that envelope was not going to comfort me. It was going to change something fundamental, something I wouldn't be able to put back the way, and once I read it, there would be no going back. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my mother's bed staring at the ceiling, the envelope resting on my chest like it had weight far beyond paper, and sometime before dawn, when the house was at its quietest, I finally opened it slowly, carefully, as if the way I handled it could soften whatever truth was waiting inside. But it didn't, because the moment I unfolded the paper and saw her handwriting steady, deliberate, unmistakably hers, I felt something inside me tighten. My dear Evelyn. She hadn't called me that in years. Not since I was young. Not since life became too busy for small tenderness. I kept reading, my hands no longer shaking but strangely cold, as if my body had already begun to understand what my mind was still trying to catch up to. And the words were simple, direct, almost practical, the way she always spoke. No wasted emotion, no unnecessary softness. If you are reading this, it means I am gone, and there are things you need to know, things I chose not to tell you while I was alive, not because I didn't trust you, but because I knew what it would cost you to carry them. I stopped there, read that line again, what it would cost me. My mother had lived with nothing, in a house that barely held itself together, wearing the same coat every winter, fixing things instead of replacing them. And now she was telling me there was something heavy enough to protect me from. I kept reading. There is a place you must go, a name you must give, and when you do, they will understand who you are. My heart started beating faster now, not from grief, from confusion, from something closer to fear. Inside the envelope, there was a second piece of paper, smaller, folded twice, and when I opened it, I found an address, not in this country, not even close, and beneath it, a single line written in the same careful hand. Tell them Margaret Hale sent you. I stared at it for a long time. My mother had never traveled, never spoken about anything beyond this town, this house, this life that seemed so contained, so limited. And yet here I was, holding an address in a place I had never heard her mention even once. The room felt different now, smaller, heavier, as if I had stepped into something that had been waiting for me long before I realized it existed. I folded the letter again, slower this time, more carefully, as if it deserved more respect now that I understood it wasn't just a goodbye. It was a direction, a beginning, and for the first time since that phone call, I felt something stronger than grief. I felt pulled, not by curiosity alone, but by something my mother had left unfinished. And whether I understood it or not, she had chosen me to finish it. By the next morning, I had already decided I was going to follow the address. I didn't know why, not fully, but there was something about the way my mother had written that letter, something certain, something that didn't feel like a suggestion And before I could even begin to process what that meant, my daughter called me again, her voice different, this time sharper, more alert. Mom, what did Grandma leave? Not, how are you? Not, are you okay? Just that. What did she leave? I sat at the kitchen table, the letter beside me, and for a moment I didn't answer because I didn't know how to explain something I didn't understand myself. She left a letter, I said finally. A pause. That's it? She asked, and I could hear the disappointment. Quick, unfiltered, like she hadn't even tried to hide it. That's all we know, I replied, choosing my words carefully. Another pause, longer this time. Well, the house isn't worth much, she said, almost casually. So if there's anything else, we should probably figure it out. We. I looked around the kitchen, at the worn cabinets, the old clock, the chair my mother used every morning, and something inside me shifted again, sharper this time, because suddenly, this wasn't just about loss anymore. It was about expectation, about what people thought they were owed. I'll let you know, I said, and ended the call before she could say anything else. The silence that followed felt different now, not empty, watchful, as if something had already started moving beneath the surface. That afternoon, my son finally called back, his tone lighter, almost impatient. I heard Grandma passed. Sorry, Mom, he said quickly, and before I could respond, he added, Listen, do we need to handle any paperwork or anything? Like, assets. Assets. I closed my eyes for a moment. No, I said quietly. There's nothing like that. And it wasn't a lie. Not yet. But the moment I hung up, I realized something that settled deep in my chest, heavier than anything else so far. They weren't grieving her. They were measuring what she left behind. And the truth was, I didn't know what she had left behind either. But I was starting to understand one thing very clearly. Whatever it was, she hadn't trusted them with it. And that realization didn't just create distance, it created tension. Because if they ever found out there was more, they wouldn't let it go. 3 days later, I was sitting on a plane, the letter folded inside my bag, the address memorized even though I kept checking it as if it might change, as if this whole thing might suddenly make sense before I landed. But it didn't. And the longer the flight went on, the more doubt started to creep in. Quiet, at first, then louder. What if this meant nothing? What if I had misunderstood? What if I was chasing something that didn't exist? My mother had lived her entire life in that small house, never asking for more, never showing signs of anything beyond what we all believed she was. And yet, she had left me this. A direction, a name, a reason to leave everything behind and follow something I couldn't explain. When the plane landed, the air felt different, colder, unfamiliar, and the city around me moved with a kind of quiet precision that made me feel even more out of place, like I had stepped into someone else's life without permission. The address led me to a building near the water, old, stone, quiet, in a way that felt deliberate, not abandoned, not forgotten, just controlled. I stood outside for a moment longer than I needed to, because something inside me already knew. This was it. This was where the truth started, and once I stepped inside, there would be no turning back. I pushed the door open. The air inside smelled faintly of polished wood and paper, clean, organized, intentional, and behind a desk near the far wall, a woman looked up, her expression neutral at first, professional, until I walked closer and placed the folded paper in front of her. My mother told me to come here, I said quietly. She glanced at the paper, then at me. And your mother's name? She asked. I hesitated for just a second. Then I said it. Margaret Hale. Everything changed. Her expression shifted, subtle but unmistakable. Her posture straightening, her attention sharpening in a way that made my chest tighten, and without another word, she reached for the phone beside her, speaking softly, quickly, in a language I didn't understand. Then she hung up, looked at me again. And this time, there was no neutrality left. Please, she said, her voice different now, respectful, almost careful. We've been expecting you. In that moment, standing in a place I had never been, surrounded by people who somehow knew my mother better than I did, I felt something break open inside me. Because whatever life I thought she had lived was only a small part of the truth, and I was about to find out just how much she had kept hidden. The current value is $12,400,000. That was the first sentence that truly registered. And for a moment, I didn't react. Not because I understood it, but because my mind refused to accept that those numbers belonged in the same sentence as my mother's life. The same life that had unfolded in a small, aging house with worn furniture and carefully saved grocery receipts. And I found myself staring at the page, blinking slowly, as if the number might change if I looked at it long enough. It didn't. I read it again, more carefully this time, letting each digit settle. And something inside me shifted. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but deeply, like a quiet foundation beginning to crack. That's not possible, I said, my voice lower than I expected, almost distant, across from me. The woman didn't correct me, didn't argue. She simply turned the page, and that small movement felt louder than anything she could have said. Because the next pages weren't numbers. They were names. Dozens of them. Carefully documented, each one paired with a date, a situation, an amount, and as I moved through them slowly, the pattern became impossible to ignore. These weren't transactions. They were interventions. Moments where something had gone wrong in someone's life, and someone had stepped in to change it. My mother. The realization didn't come gently. It pressed into me, heavy and undeniable, because every dollar she had refused to spend on herself had gone somewhere else, somewhere purposeful, somewhere we had never seen. And I felt something sharp rise in my chest. Not just surprise, something closer to guilt. We thought she had nothing. We believed that. We accepted it. And all that time, she had been giving everything away. She never wanted recognition, the woman said quietly, as if she could feel the weight settling in the room. Only results. 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 I looked down at the pages again, at the lives quietly listed in ink. And for the first time, my mother's life began to rearrange itself in my mind. Not small, not limited, but deliberate, controlled, chosen. And we had never questioned it. Then the woman placed another envelope in front of me, separate from the others, untouched. And I didn't need to ask what it was, because I already knew. My name was written on it. Again. But this time, it didn't feel like a discovery. It felt like a hand being placed on my shoulder. Firm, intentional, leaving something behind. I picked it up slowly, feeling the weight of it, knowing that whatever was inside wasn't just meant to explain the past. It was meant to shape what came next. And as I held it there, I understood something with a clarity that left no room for doubt. My mother hadn't just kept a secret. She had built something in silence. And now she had left it to me. Mom, I just heard. Is it true? The call came before I even left the building, and the urgency in my daughter's voice told me everything had already started. The quiet was gone. The distance that once surrounded my mother's life had been replaced by something faster, louder, harder to control. And I paused before answering. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I suddenly understood that whatever I said next would shape everything that followed. "What have you heard?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "That Grandma had money. A lot of it," she said quickly, almost breathless now. "People are talking, Mom. I just need to know what's going on." People are talking. Not "how are you?" Not "are you okay?" Just that. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, letting that settle. Because it wasn't surprising, but it was revealing. And when I opened them again, something in me had shifted. Something quieter, more grounded. "It's not what you think," I said. "Then tell me what it is," she replied, sharper now, and I could hear it clearly, the edge beneath her voice. Not fear, not concern, expectation. Before I could respond, another call came through. Then another. My son, a cousin, a number I didn't recognize. And I let them ring, one after the other, until the silence returned. Heavier this time, filled with everything they were about to ask. That evening in my hotel room, the folder lay open in front of me, the pages still untouched where I had left them, and my phone continued to light up on the table again and again. Messages, stacking names appearing that hadn't reached out in years, and I watched it without picking it up because for the first time, I understood something my mother had known all along. It wasn't the money that needed protection. It was what the money was meant to do. I reached for the second envelope then, the one she had left specifically for me, and for a moment I hesitated. Not out of fear, but because I already felt the answer forming before I even read it. Why me? Out of everyone. Out of all of them. I opened it carefully, unfolding the paper, and the first lines settled into me with a weight that felt both heavy and certain. "I chose you because you will not confuse love with ownership." I exhaled slowly, not realizing I had been holding my breath, and as I continued reading, each word felt measured, intentional, like she had written it not just to explain, but to prepare. "They will come to you," she wrote, "not with grief, but with reasons, with logic, with fairness, and you must understand that what they call fairness will not be justice." My grip tightened slightly on the page, because it was already happening. The calls, the urgency, the sudden interest. She had seen it before it even began. "You will feel alone," she continued, "because doing what is right often removes you from those who are closest to you." I stopped reading there, not because I didn't want to continue, but because I understood. Completely. This wasn't just a letter, it was a warning. And the hardest part hadn't even started yet. "Mom, we're all here, we need to talk." That was how it started. Simple, controlled, almost polite. But the moment I stepped into that room and saw everyone sitting there waiting, I knew this wasn't a conversation. It was something already decided, something already building, and I hadn't even taken my seat before I felt the shift, the subtle tension in the way they looked at me, not with warmth, not even with grief, but with something more focused. Expectation. I sat down slowly, placing my bag beside me, aware of the letter inside it, aware of the words that had already prepared me for this moment. And for a few seconds, no one spoke, as if they were waiting for me to begin. I didn't. My daughter did. "Mom, we need to talk about Grandma's money." There was no hesitation this time, no softening, just direct, clear, and final. I looked at her, then at the others, my son leaning forward slightly, my relatives watching quietly, and for the first time, I allowed myself to see what had always been there beneath the surface. Not concern, not connection, interest. "What about it?" I asked calmly. My son spoke next, his tone measured, controlled in a way that felt practiced. "We just want to understand how it's being handled and what's fair." Fair. The word landed heavily, because suddenly, the room wasn't about loss anymore. It was about division, about entitlement, about assigning value to something they had never been part of. And I felt the weight of my mother's letter again, steadying me. "This isn't an inheritance," I said. The silence that followed was immediate, sharp. My daughter frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "It means," I continued, keeping my voice even, "it was never meant for us." The shift was instant. Confusion first. Then disbelief. Then something harder. "That doesn't make any sense," my son said, his voice rising just slightly. "It's her money, Mom. It belongs to the family." I shook my head slowly. "No," I said, "it belongs to what she chose." That was the moment everything broke. Voices overlapped. Questions turned into accusations. Fair turned into unfair. Concern turned into frustration. And I sat there, listening, not interrupting, not defending, because somewhere in the middle of all that noise, I realized something with a clarity that hurt more than I expected. I had already lost my mother. Now, I was watching myself lose them. Not all at once. Not loudly. But piece by piece, with every word they said, with every expectation they placed in front of me, with every attempt to turn her life into something that could be divided and claimed. And the hardest part wasn't what they were asking. It was what they couldn't see. That this was never about money. It was about what my mother had chosen to stand for. And in that moment, I understood exactly what she meant. Doing the right thing doesn't just test you. It separates you. I didn't give it to them. And that's the moment I lost my family. That truth didn't arrive all at once. It settled slowly over the days that followed in the quiet, that replaced the arguments, in the unanswered calls that suddenly stopped coming, in the absence of messages that had once felt overwhelming, and I found myself sitting alone in my house, the same way my mother had sat in hers, surrounded by silence that no longer felt temporary. At first, I thought it would pass, that they would understand, that time would soften what had been said. But time didn't soften anything. It clarified it. Because when people believe something belongs to them, they don't let go easily, and when they realize they can't have it, they don't always stay. My daughter stopped calling. My son sent one message, short, distant, careful. "We need space." Space. I read it more than once, not because I didn't understand it, but because I did. And that understanding carried something heavier than anger. It carried acceptance, because for the first time, I saw the shape of what my mother had protected me from, not just the conflict, not just the pressure, but the quiet unraveling of relationships that were never as strong as I believed them to be. Weeks passed. The house grew quieter, and in that quiet, something unexpected began to take its place. Not relief, not peace. Something steadier, something clearer, something clearer. I returned to that building again, the one my mother had trusted, the one that had held her secret all these years. And this time, I didn't hesitate when I walked inside, because I wasn't searching for answers anymore. I had them. What I needed now was direction. The woman greeted me differently this time, not with formality but with recognition, as if something about me had already changed, and I sat across from her, placing the folder on the table between us, not as something I had discovered, but as something I had accepted. "I'm ready," I said quietly. She didn't ask what I meant. She already knew. Because this wasn't the first time someone had sat in that chair with the same decision resting on their shoulders. We went through everything slowly, carefully. Not just the numbers, not just the structure, but the purpose behind it. The people it would continue to reach, the lives it would continue to change. And for the first time, I didn't feel overwhelmed by it. I felt aligned with it, because I finally understood what my mother had built. Not wealth, not security, meaning. Every choice she made, every comfort she gave up, every moment she chose silence over recognition, it had all been leading to this. Not to be admired, but to be continued. Months later, I found myself sitting in a place far from home, across from someone whose life was about to change in a way they didn't yet understand. And as I listened to their story, I heard something familiar in it. Not the details, not the circumstances, but the quiet weight of someone who had been overlooked, underestimated, left to carry more than they should have alone. And without thinking, I did what my mother had done, quietly, without announcement, without expectation. I helped. No recognition, no explanation, just impact. And in that moment, something inside me settled in a way I hadn't felt since before. That phone call at 5:52 in the morning. Not because I had replaced what I lost, but because I had understood it. Fully, completely. I still think about my family. Of course I do. Loss doesn't disappear just because you understand it. It changes shape. There are moments, quiet ones, where I wonder if things could have been different, if I could have explained it better, if I could have made them see what I see now. But deep down, I know the truth. This was never about explanation. It was about choice. Their choice. And mine. The last thing my mother wrote to me was something I didn't fully understand when I first read it, but now, it feels like the simplest truth she could have left behind. People will remember what you leave them, but they will never fully understand what you chose to give up. I carry that with me now, not as a burden, as a reminder. Because my mother didn't leave me money, she didn't leave me answers. She left me something far more difficult, the responsibility to see clearly and still choose what is right. And sometimes, late at night, when everything is quiet, I think back to that moment, the phone ringing, the stillness before everything changed, and I realize something I couldn't see then. My mother didn't leave this world with nothing. She left quietly, yes, but she left behind something that continues, something that grows, something that reaches further than any of us ever knew. And in the end, that was her real life, not the one we saw, the one she chose. And now, it's the one I choose too.